Hey there, welcome back. So today we're going to delve into a topic that's, well, pretty important for us guys. In fact, it might just be one of the most important topics for men, if not the most important. You've probably already guessed what I'm talking about. Yep, you got it. We're talking about erectile function. You know, when we talk about erectile dysfunction, the first thing that usually comes to mind is testosterone, right? But did you know there's actually another molecule that plays a huge role in this? Yeah, it's called nitric oxide, or NO for short. You see, if your body doesn't have enough of this nitric oxide, well, you might find it quite challenging to achieve an erection. Now, this nitric oxide is something our bodies produce naturally, and it's super important for our health. One of its key roles? Vasodilation. That's a fancy term for the relaxation of the inner muscles of our blood vessels. When this happens, our blood vessels widen and circulation improves. And here's the interesting part. This increased blood flow is what leads to an erection. Yeah, fascinating, isn't it? I've been doing some reading and found some expert opinions on the importance of nitric oxide, as well as ways to increase it naturally. So let's dive in and see what they have to say.
There are people with normal testosterone that have erectile dysfunction, and there are people with abnormal testosterone or low testosterone and don't have erectile dysfunction. So why is that? One of the most important molecules involved in erectile dysfunction is this thing called nitric oxide. Apparently, nitric oxide decreases as you get older. It's at a level of 50% when you reach age 40. And nitric oxide is a major player in erections. In fact, Viagra uses certain nitric oxide pathways. And so the most likely reason for someone with erectile dysfunction has to do with a deficiency of this molecule, nitric oxide. So nitric oxide is made by your endothelial cells. That's the cells on the inside of the artery. Nitric oxide helps relax your arteries and it increases blood flow, not just with erections, but also your cardiovascular system and other systems in the body. Nitric oxide increases oxygen release in your blood. And so if you don't have enough nitric oxide, you're going to have a hard time breathing. 79% of people with sleep apnea have erectile dysfunction. Nitric oxide helps to regulate cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And it's a proven fact that the more anxiety someone has, the more cortisol someone has, the more stress they have, the more they're going to experience erectile dysfunction. Now, here's another connection that's interesting. Nitric oxide has a profound effect over testicular steroids. This means that it helps you make testosterone. If you're low in nitric oxide, you're probably not going to make as much testosterone. Nitric oxide also is intimately involved in the sleep cycles, including REM sleep. This could be also why if someone has sleeping problems, insomnia, or definitely sleep apnea, that they have a greater risk of erectile dysfunction. Nitric oxide also increases insulin sensitivity. This also explains why a diabetic who always has insulin resistance usually also has erectile dysfunction.
Nitric oxide is the ignition for erections. If you don't have nitric oxide, you cannot have an erection. So it actually improves the ability of your endothelial cells, which are your lining of your blood vessels, to create nitric oxide. Also, it improves some other cells called progenitor cells that also increase and help, again, make more nitric oxide and essentially make healthier blood vessels and help with erections.
So nitric oxide is the compound in your body that causes blood vessels to relax, dilate, and fill up with blood in the first place. Now, the quick fix that most people reach to when it comes to having boner problems, erection problems, is they look for the little blue pill. The problem is, these don't work all the time if your body is lacking nitrates. If it's unable to produce nitric oxide in the first place, taking the little blue pill ain't gonna do anything.
Okay, so now we know that nitric oxide is, well, the key to having an erection. But what happens if it depletes as we age? Does that mean we won't be able to have an erection inevitably? Are all of us men doomed? Well, luckily, there are ways to increase nitric oxide in our bodies naturally. Yes, you heard it right. Naturally. So, let's hear what these experts suggest, shall we?
How do you increase nitric oxide? Is there a way to do it naturally? And the answer is yes. Number one, you can start doing what's called nasal breathing. Start breathing through your nose, not your mouth. Apparently, when you do that, you increase nitric oxide. There's actually 50% more resistance with breathing through your nose than your mouth. And apparently that increases nitric oxide to your lungs and the rest of your body. Now, if you combine that with number two, regular exercise. So let's say, for example, you're going to do a mild exercise where you're doing some type of exercise where you're not breathing intensively. If you can breathe through your nose, you will then increase nitric oxide. And exercise improves your endothelial cells in your vascular system, which will then improve nitric oxide. Now, you can also increase nitrates from foods to improve nitric oxide. The foods that are high in nitrates would be beets, spinach, kale, any of the leafy greens. Those are all high in nitrates and will help you increase nitric oxide. Now, of course, on the flip side, you would want to avoid sugar because that destroys the inside of the arteries. You would want to avoid alcohol too, because that also decreases nitric oxide. You'd also want to try to keep your stress low because stress can inhibit nitric oxide as well. And number five, do things to improve your sleep. Okay, that's going to help increase your nitric oxide. So these are 5 natural things you can do to overcome the decrease of nitric oxide, which comes from aging.
Exercise always improves sexual function. We know that people who have good cardiovascular health are less likely to get erectile dysfunction, and that's because their arteries are healthy, so they have good blood flow. So of course, exercise helps cardiovascular health. That's unequivocal. We know that that's true. Also, it helps improve weight loss. It improves glycemic control, meaning your blood sugars are better controlled, and improves blood pressure, all things that are associated with poor erections. And lastly, exercise improves testosterone. Now, the way this works is it activates the hypothalamic pituitary axis. So what that is that the axis that creates testosterone, that function of that improves. It also reduces something called sex hormone binding globulin. Now, if you didn't know, a lot of your testosterone is bound by proteins. Now, that's sex hormone binding globulin and albumin. Aerobic exercise actually reduces your sex hormone binding globulin so that more of your testosterone is free for your body to use for all the important functions that testosterone provides. But ultimately, testosterone, one of the things that is really important is erectile function.
Guys, that's quite a bit to digest, isn't it? Well, don't worry, I've got you covered. Here's a quick rundown of what we've discussed in the video. Nitric oxide is, well, essential for erectile function. The natural ways to boost nitric oxide in our bodies include nasal breathing, doing aerobic exercises regularly, eating foods rich in nitrates, think beets, spinach, kale, or any leafy greens, and avoiding sugar and alcohol. And of course, improving the quality of your sleep. Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover in this video. If there are any topics you'd like me to delve into, just drop a comment below. Until then, I'm out.